Hello, my name is Carol May Whittick, spiritual life coach and your host of Her Conversations, Tools for the Awakening. Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. This is the optimal state to embody in order to attract our highest desires. What is the awakening? This is the moment in time when humanity rises up out of the darkness. Who is awakening? Each one of us present on earth today, reclaiming our sovereignty, seeking greater possibilities in our reality and looking for solutions. We know being awakened is not a lofty ideal but a necessity. If we can transform ourselves, we can change the world. Guests on Her Conversations speak to your spirituality, sensuality and soul. Listen to their stories and hear how they are in service to the world. Let their words and these conversations embolden and inspire you. My guest on this week's episode is Claudia Torres, founder of Presently Aqui and Our Mindful Kids. Presently Aqui is a global community of healers from all backgrounds. Our Mindful Kids, an online mindfulness school for children 7 to 12 years of age. During our conversation, Claudia shares how the world events of the past 3 years inspired her to create Presently Aqui and Our Mindful Kids. She also shares her own awakening story, shares about the lessons she has learned, and the mission she feels that she and many others have been called to do. So as always, I begin by asking my guests, Her is an acronym for Higher Energetic Resonance. When do you feel you're most her?
I love this question, and I would have to say when I'm teaching the children. And also, I would say that first, right? So when I'm teaching the children after I'm done with, it doesn't have to be the entire day, just each child. My cup is filled and I'm in that high vibrational space, right? That high energetic resonance. And I've never had anything like that. And also when I record my podcast, I also get a high energetic resonance right after done with my guest. What I'm realizing, the tie between the two is being your most authentic self, right? And being able to express that through either teaching the children or conversation with a fellow kindred spirit such as yourself. So I would say those two. And when I'm in a great space within myself where I can sit and close my eyes in meditation with nothing, no sounds, no guidance on just me, just taking deep breaths and feeling my body and my mind and everything else that's going on and sitting in gratitude. Those are my top three and those are new fairly to me. I mean, before that, I wouldn't even know where to, how would I even answer that question? But definitely I think when you're filling your cup and your cup is overflowing, it's when I can feel it at the most. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful response. Thank you. And before we go further into our conversation, Claudia, can you just share a little bit about your journey and what led you into the work that you're doing now and especially working with children, because I think that's just such a beautiful, beautiful offering.
Yes, definitely. Well, my journey is starting in New York City. I'm born and raised. I lived there for a majority of my life. And living in such a hard city, for those of you that never, growing up and being raised in a space like that is different than going to visit and being an adult and living there for a little bit. It really creates a hardness within you, a lot of defensiveness, a lot of survivor mechanisms, which I'm sure we all have, but it's harder to let go of when it's a part of your environment as well. And not having a healthy childhood upbringing, so all of these things, all these traumas. And also when I became a young adult, I got into hospitality and worked in hotels and majority hotels. And so all of that kind of made me in that self-awareness space. Like I was really self-aware at a young age and hyper aware of my environment, right? Because when your environment's so hard, you become hyper vigilant, right? So you have to, make sure no one's following you, no one's who's there, and like you're so in fight or flight all the time. It's exhausting to your nervous system, and you don't know until you live somewhere else, right? And so I didn't know. So that was natural, being in that space, just always being constricted, tight. And in my family setting, in at work, right? Because working in hotels, I worked in high luxury hotels, so I have to manage expectations. So I have to be 3 steps ahead of what the guest needs. And so all of that, you're still kind of putting yourself in the back burner, right? And also not realizing you're doing that, right? These are all just things that you're a product of your environment. And but outside of that, within myself, what was happening was loneliness, because I couldn't relate to what was going on outside of me, because I was so hyper aware of knowing that I was different, and I just didn't know what that meant and how to express that, or what that even meant for myself, right? So how can I put that outside? So I actually got to experience living outside of New York. I lived in Miami for 3 years. And because it's such a slow environment and relax, and it's beach time every day. And that was the first time my nervous system got a break. And I thought, oh, wow, I don't have to live that way, that New York City way. That's not everywhere, right? And so that really stayed with me. And then I ended up going back home, only to realize that I love that Miami softened me, right? It let me let go a little bit and see myself and feel myself, right? And then going back home, it just started to build again. And so immediately I thought, like, what is my exit strategy? How am I leaving this space again? And so I landed here in Los Angeles 5 years ago. And I knew that when I moved here, that I would expand. I just knew that the energetic field was bigger here, and I was able to just be, right? So when I moved here, my first year was one of the hardest years of my life. I felt like there was so many lessons waiting for me. Like, I think that first year felt like 10 years of lessons. It was so much. And right, in retrospect, right, because I'm not in that space anymore, but I'm so grateful. It was so difficult, so hard. I was homeless. I was definitely feeling alone and all of these things, but I was still grateful to be here. I was not leaving. And then shortly after, the pandemic came and I lost my job like most people. So in that space, I was happy. I was like, great, I enjoy being with myself because I've done a lot of my inner work, and able to just have my own apartment and just relax and not have, again, my nervous system is super calm now. I know that's one of my goals, to make sure that I'm always in that space. And so immediately I realized that, wait, not everyone is having a good time being home, because they've never been home with themselves, with their families, with their, forced reflection, basically. And so that kind of led me into realizing the gift that I've accumulated through time. Because I did meet myself the first time in my mid-20s, when I stepped into my first yoga mat. And I met meditation, I met mindfulness, and all these tools that I was already in. I just didn't know what they meant, right? And through time, they just kept growing and growing and growing. And so when this opportunity came of just sitting at home and seeing that everyone's having a hard time, I thought, well, what if I create a YouTube video of like having other healers on, and we can talk about mental health? It doesn't have to be specifically to my field of mindfulness, and just have a conversation, see where that leads to. And so that I started in 2020, at the end of 2020. And so summer of 21, I had an angel investor see the dedication that I had to spread awareness on, how we can feel safe within ourselves, basically, is the message. How can we feel safe within ourselves? How can we accept where life has brought us thus far, now that we're home and seeing ourselves, self-forgiveness, self-compassion. And so I was gifted a podcasting class and turned it into a podcast. And that turned into now, which you understand, a community of healers, and I now talk to, and letting them share their journey of self-discovery and self-healing. And in that podcast, I interviewed this woman from Maine in the United States, where she has a spirit camp for children, where she teaches children about their spirit, their chakras, their intuition, right? Their relationship with Gaia, with nature. And so I had a wonderful conversation. Months later, she invited me to teach mindfulness at her school for the children. Because in my past, I did teach kids yoga in New York for a short time. And so she just kind of, I guess, felt this energetic resonance, right? That I was able to do such a thing. And so it was something completely new. And I was so nervous because I already know that children see you, like they see right through you. So I had to prepare for that. And so I had to do some internal work and also look at myself in the mirror. Like, can I see myself in the mirror and love myself? Because they're going to know that I don't. So they're not going to trust me. And so I did my first class with this beautiful girl, 9 years old, and that changed my life. I had no words because I didn't plan for this. I didn't set a goal of this is what's going to happen. I've been a singer for most of my life, and I thought that was going to be it. I was going to sing my way through life. But when this opportunity arose, I don't see myself doing nothing else. What it was doing, it was also healing my inner child and allowing my inner child to come out and play with these children. And I actually had this beautiful lady do a reading on, my life. I won a reading actually from her, and she said something remarkable, and I was crying. So she said, the children are teaching you how to teach them. And I thought, yeah, that's exactly what is happening. So the children have welcomed me into their energetic resonance, because the energetic resonance of children is a real thing, right? We were in that energetic resonance at one point. Now we're adults, we're in a different space. But the energy field of the children is so powerful and so strong. And they are seeking people like myself. They're out there. And that woman, her name is Ava, she teaches spirit camp. They're desperately seeking to be led in a higher energetic resonance and a higher frequency, an unconditional loving frequency. And so they do welcome that. So when she said that, I definitely felt that, because I had taught already a few more kids by then. And it definitely shifts now the way I teach, because I'm guiding them with the tools and the words that they need to have to what they already know. Because honestly, what I'm teaching them is not something new to them. Because mindfulness is something that exists already within all of us. It's just something we have to access, which is the present moment, and using the awareness of that present moment to feel your feelings, think, really see your thoughts, to see your life, to see yourself, and then go from there. What space do you want to go into? Do you want to see your traumas? Do you want to deeply love yourself? Do you want to look at your life and maybe shift a few things that you may not be in resonance with, right? So the children really have changed me in a way that I'm okay to be here forever. And it's humbling. It brings me to my knees of just to, I felt like it's being asked to do this mission. What, wow. I don't, like, honestly, there are no words. It's like I would say I feel it in my heart and my solar plexus.
Mm-hmm.
It's so big, and it isn't, there's no space for the ego to live in, because it forces this higher energetic resonance within me to just exude, that it almost feels like I'm channeling a higher power while I teach. And then I get to feel that for myself. I'm not only giving it to them, but I'm giving it to me at the same time. And, you know, I'm in my 40s now, and to find a new purpose at this age is something I didn't anticipate, and nor was I looking for.
Mm.
So I'm beyond grateful for the way things shifted, right? The way, because it's not, also realizing life wasn't happening to me, it was happening for me. And I just didn't know that until I got older, and seeing like, oh, when I release and surrender to the flow of the universe and these ideas that have come, just that YouTube channel of like, hi, I want to help others understand themselves a little more, and just let that write out into a podcast, into this woman, into now I started my own school called Our Mindful Kids, which I teach online. And even still having the podcast, because I live in a higher energetic resonance. And this is why Carol May and I just really clicked, that I'm able to have these conversations with kindred spirits around the world and not feel alone anymore in my thoughts and the things that I know and the things that I feel, that we're also heading into this beautiful space. All of us, we're doing the work. We're becoming these lighthouses for everyone else who is now realizing and coming into their self-awareness. And so it helps me in my mental space to feel safe. And then with the kids, I feel happy and joyous. So it's this beautiful balance that I did not plan for at all.
Perfect. It's there's so many parallels actually with your journey and things that I went through of having a musical background and singing, and then I worked in hospitality as well for membership clubs and high level 5-star restaurants and hotels in London and everything. So I know what it's like to be at that kind of, the ones where the celebrities, that high level kind of hotel. And thinking, things that I heard that you said that I'm like, yeah, I remember that, especially when I don't know how this resonates with you, but when you work in the service industry, which a lot of people who are performing tend to do because it's quite flexible. But unless you are really solid, it can strip a lot from you, because you are in a state where you're serving, but not in a way that you're not serving from the heart, whereas this kind of work feels so much heart and soul led. You're on a physical level, you tend to meet a lot of people who will not see you, know, and especially when you're living in a city, as I was at the time, was living in London, and living in a city, I know that feeling, and because I've moved out and I've felt that release. So when you're living in a city, when you're chasing a dream, you're working all the hours, and then you're going into a space where you spend the most of your time being not seen, being disrespected, because when you work in the service and hospitality industry, your self-esteem is going to take a kicking.
Yes, absolutely.
How did it kind of affect you? Did you get that feeling as well?
I did. There was a man I met, and he said it well. He said, they don't pay us for emotional labor. And I thought, oh my God, that's what we're doing. That's what it is. Why does it feel so heavy? Oh, because we care naturally, right? We are natural givers. And so we're overexpending and overextending ourselves. We're emptying out our cup, right? I just said what I'm doing the opposite, filling and overflowing. And I worked at the Plaza at the height of my career in New York City. Wow. And even you think that would be like, oh my God, it wasn't. It was so empty. I hung out for 1 year and I was like, I am out of here. It was the most restrictive, confining experience of my life. And I actually enjoyed some of my jobs, and I worked in restaurants as well. But that one was just like erase who you are and put on this costume, make sure you don't show your tattoos. You only have to wear certain earrings, no nail polish, no this, put your hair back, like conform completely to us. And then do as we say, because you now have like an outline of how to word, right? Because it's 5-star, 5-diamond property and white glove service. To forget who you are and release all of that to give to someone, impossible. Impossible.
I worked at there were a couple of private members bars, so you had to be like, in the know to it. And I also worked at the Schrager Hotel, St. Martin's Lane Hotel.
Holy yes, I know.
So I worked in the bar, the light bar, which was like the hottest bar ever. You couldn't get
in my gosh
unless you were like the absolute top of the top. And people used to, in order to get into this bar, they'd book a hotel room, because you could only get in if you were a guest. So they'd pay like £200 just to, at the time, 50 just to get in. And that was like a basic room as well, just to be able to get into this bar, which was just basically a strip, of like very nice kind of furniture and design, and all the beautiful exclusive top people were there. But you were just like, you were in the background, you were nothing. You were you work in these places and it sounds amazing, and as somebody who wants to get into the music and the media, like, well, if I'm in this right place, then maybe I'll bump into so and so, and maybe it happened for a couple of people, but for the most part you're in the background. Like we had to wear, it stripped a lot out of me, hospitality, and it took you don't realize how much of a kicking it is. And also I remember feeling how draining it was on just like you say, just taking away from you, because also you're a number, you're an employee, and then you tend to work for people who are like, especially in the management, are people who have been maybe like, well, I just never wanted to be a manager, because you come from the floor, you go into management, and a lot of the people who moved into management had started like me. They were singers, they were actors, musicians, all of that kind of thing. And they came there, and then after a while they got tired of trying to do their art, so they moved into management. So there was a lot of kind of resentment and toxicity that came down. There was a lot of drugs and drinking, and just like all this kind of everything that is the worst kind of behavior.
It's super toxic.
Heavily.
And it's a dream killer, because you're saying that, right? Like the people are mostly creatives that work there, and then they finally like give up, and then I'll be a manager, and then I'll maybe become a general manager. And that's what it does. We've seen people just give up, and it's so heartbreaking because they do carry the resentment and they're mad at themselves, right? And then, but that trickles into your employees, and you don't show it to your guests, but then it does. When you just said like alcohol and drugs, we're talking about the employees. We're not talking about the guests.
Honestly, it was messy. It was messy a lot of the time, and there were so many. It was just hard to like kind of try and keep yourself in your head on your dreams when you're in an environment that we're going there because we want to work there. We're trying to do work work a job like this in a place that is amazing on the outside, but the reality of it, of being an employee in these plush places, is rarely what it looks like, and it's taking so much of your heart. And there are people that I know that are, that some of them have gone and opened their own establishments, or they've kind of worked their way up into managership and everything. And I know that a lot of them have dropped their dreams. They dropped their dreams years ago, and that was hard to see, because then it would kind of filter down their resentment, their broken dreams on newbies. You'd have like a fresh batch that came to drama school in the big city full of dreams, and then you've got this kind of person who's given up and is kind of bitter about it's such an interesting environment to be in. Like, in hindsight, when you're there, it's hard. But in hindsight, to look back and kind of see that how tough it is to really just kind of keep yourself going and be single-minded and keep your heart open, because it's an environment, just in your work environment, where so much is going on. I mean, like, hospitality and hotels is so busy and fast moving, and then you have the general public to deal with as well. Right. So, but when you managed, how did you transition out of that, the kind of the hospitality piece as well? When did you manage to kind of break away? Because I know it took me a while to get out of it.
That's the thing. It's a hole that you're sucked into. I have a career. Like, I didn't, in retrospect, by looking back at my life, I'm like, oh, wait, I've already had a whole career. Now I started a new one. And I was there for 20 years, hotels and restaurants, from, New York, Miami, and even Los Angeles. I worked in hotels both here in Los Angeles and New York, restaurants in Miami. And it took the last hotel, which was my first year here. Remember, I said in the beginning that was my big butt kicking. That hotel left me with such a bad taste in my mouth. Right there, I was like, I am done. I am never doing this again. No way, no how, because it was what you said, is just such soul sucking. And it wasn't even from the guests, it's from your coworkers, from the management. So I became reservations manager. Reservations is mostly what I did. And so I created an SOP. For those that don't know, it's a standard of procedures, right? A standard of procedures. How are we going to conduct my department? And so I did that. What ended up happening was that they used that for the entire hotel. They opened up a call center and dropped me like a sack of potatoes. Like, okay, we're done with you. Go away. Wow. And I, even though I was manager, I felt like I was never included in the meetings and and it was such a weird game. And I don't know if it's a Los Angeles, like, everyone was also so high on their position, which is what happens, right? Oh, I'm this and in this hotel. And for me, working it for so long, I'm like, so is the guy down the block. You're not
it's a London thing.
Right? It's like the next hotel, there's another general manager and another whatever manager, whatever your title is, there's plenty of them. So this high horse that everyone was on about, oh, I work here. And mind you, that hotel now got closed down during the pandemic, and it's now reopened under a different company. And so all of that for what? So right there, I was just like, and we're done. But I did enjoy working in restaurants, but because, again, I wasn't in that fast pace, I was either in reservations or the executive assistant to the chef or the general manager of one small restaurant. I was okay to do that because no one was bothering me and none of that. That's what I did after. And then I worked in a hospital after that as well, in the food industry of the hospital. But that's where I left off from the pandemic. But I will say that none of them were different. It was the same thing. Eventually, you do get tired. You're convincing yourself like, oh, well, this is different. I'm here in the back. And it's just the same energy. The restaurant I worked at here, my boss is an alcoholic, speaking of alcohol, and I had to leave because he was stealing money and I didn't want it to, because I'm number two, right? So it would fall on So I brought it to the owner's attention, and all this drama. It's just nonstop. I also think, like, why isn't there no reality shows on hotels and restaurants? Like, there's so much drama. It would be such a good show. It's always some juicy stuff going on.
Right.
And so the hospital was a high-end hospital. I'm not gonna say their name, but the food they were feeding people, and I'm like, your patients are here, they're sick and they're suffering from different conditions. Why are you buying cheap quality food and not high nutritional value food for them? It blew my mind. And so I was really happy that I did lose my job. And then when everything took a turn, I was like, oh, thank you. But I still, because everything is so new, my school is so new, the podcast is so new to me, and I know it's going to take time. So I do have I've shifted into real estate, which I work from home, and it's a commercial real estate company, and I just had to property manage from here. And so great team. I also realized, through all of that toxicity of the service industry, that I sat with myself and really manifested the type of job that I wanted, because all the free money during the pandemic was running out, right? So I was like, okay, no, we're going to sit here and we're not going to take any job. And we don't. And I did interview Carol May at some hotels during that time. And I will tell you that my body was physically sick just sitting in the interview. Like, no, I need to leave. I don't even want to be in this building. I'm not even working here. And I can't. I got PTSD. It's crazy. I was just
like, the reason I'm laughing is everything that you're saying is everything that I've been through. Just the whole, the one, some of the things, there was one membership bar that I worked in, and I'd actually left London for a little bit. It was after 2008, 2009, and I'd come out of hospitality and I'd gone into like a production company. And then 2009 we got made redundant because 2008, 2009, and then then I was like, my God, I've just, I spent 3 years at that company building up their production side and going into client relation, kind of building a system because the company was new. And then someone comes in and goes, oh, sorry, you don't have a job. And I'm like, but I was on the way out there as well, because I was just in my mind going like, I'm still gigging on the side and trying to do the music, and how can I just work in just doing me, so I was really reluctant. So I came out of London, came back and went back because I had a few friends in hospitality that they worked on one of the top membership clubs in clubs in London, and it was awful. One, because I thought because I'd done it before I could do it again, but I was stepping back into like going back, and it was like, no, this is horrible. But also witnessing the ego and the self-importance of middle management,
Oh, right. Not even higher management, right?
Yeah, like when there was one time we had Madonna come in, and like it was her birthday, maybe it was her 50th birthday or something like that, and it turned already suspect people into psychopaths. In just the way that they were acting, the way that they started to speak to us. And at that point I wasn't doing like waitressing, I was doing kind of hosting, so I was on the door, and but it was just seeing people just turn. But then finding out, even these people that were monsters, they had, you found out, didn't you know that so and so's an actor, didn't you know that? And you're like, really? And it's like what it really outlined and showed to me is like, if you veer off your dreams for something that's going to give you some shallow disappointment, that will be you. You'll be that person. You've got to, however difficult it is, however broke you feel, if you're down to like you've got to kind of find another way of coming out of it. And that was a lesson. That was probably the dip into the first dark night of the first deep dark night of the soul that it was. But so many tales of horror. But I want to bring it back to when 2020 hit. Like we will forever, all of us,
forever changed.
who are alive now. We'll always have these stories of like, what did that shift in the world and that abject crazy, how did it change your perspective and then the way that you felt that you needed to show up? What did that do for you?
Oh, that was, January. My birthday is January, right? I went to Mexico, and I usually don't go anywhere for my birthday that great. And so went there, came back on the airport. On the way back, I was already hearing rumors about this virus. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. February, I'm clairsentient. That is like for those that don't know, it's just being so in tune with feeling, meaning I can sense the energetic fields of what feeling, meaning like, and I know a lot of you like, I should text this person, or I have a feeling that I should turn left versus right, like that kind of feeling, that intuition, right? And so that is the ability I've always had. And that February, I'll never forget, I was out in my balcony and I thought, oh, what is this? What is this feeling? This is huge. It felt like a wave, a 10-foot wave was just about to hit. And I don't have the other clairs where I can see or understand deeper what was coming, but what came, we all know what came that March. And so when it hit, I thought, first, wow. Secondly, it made me more want to tap into this feeling, right? How can I practice more this my clairsentience? How can I get in there more? Because I felt this was coming. I just didn't know what it was. So being so tapped into yourself, when you are in this space and you know yourself well enough, which means that you also know where you come from, which is unconditional love. I don't even have to complicate it and give it names. When all of this came, I knew instinctively that was enough for me. No, I don't agree with whatever this is. No. And still, I was still at the hospital. So I was in a space where it was a big mandatory situation, right? And I was already the person who wouldn't get the flu shot. I was already that person. And in the hospital, when you don't, as an employee, and you don't get the flu shot, you have to wear a mask. So I was already there. I was already wearing masks, right? So when it came, I was like, oh, I'm already wearing a mask. But I knew that eventually it would come around where I would be forced to take, the vaccinations. And so Spirit came in and, they had to cut down the department. I lost my job. I was like, holy cow, this is fantastic. I probably made this happen because there was no way that I was going to stay here and overturn my life for someone else's suggestion, right? And so, because instinctively I knew that I was not going to, because it was just, basically it wasn't vibrating in a high frequency, I can tell. And I was not going to go partake into something when I've been doing so much work to just be like, okay, just because you say so, no. And also doing my research and following that intuition. I think that's the most important thing. No matter what you read and what you think is, or what the exterior tells you, your compass is you, not what someone else is saying. And that's the big lesson here. And again, I don't want to come into the space that what other people's choices was wrong, because we also don't know what we didn't know. And we made decisions on that space where we were at, wherever that may have been. And if you had taken it, you thought that was the best choice. That was the best choice for you at that moment, right? But for me personally, I felt it and I said, no, I'm not doing this. So when, again, I lost my job and I was home, that's when I started thinking like, okay, I know that I live in a different reality than majority of the people, but I also have acquired so many tools and knowledge through my experience and my traumas. And I have the ability to feel and see, right? The feeling allows me to see intuitively into where you are. And I knew that people weren't in that space. So I wasn't going to go around and tell people what to do about this. But what I could do instead is give them a little piece of their sovereignty, right? Where they can understand mental health, meaning yourself a little bit deeper, start to question things outside of you. And maybe that'll inspire you to see that you, prior to the pandemic, we've all been running on autopilot, right? And now we have the opportunity to kind of stop that, stop the movie, everyone, and really look at that frame, like pause the frame and see, like, is this the life I've always wanted? Is this the me I've always wanted to be? Is this the world that I want to participate in? And so that also was a parallel journey for me, right? Because even though I was in that space and seeing and feeling all these things, I needed to dive deeper into that for myself as well. How can I really fully be in sovereign space for myself? Because it's all about, I think the Dalai Lama says, right, be the change you want to see in the world, right? I had to embody aspects of that in order to be heard, right? For people to come listen to my podcast. I can't just say things, I have to live it. I had to really show that I am in that space. So, or even the kids, the same, right? How can I tell them that, hey, who you are as you are is perfect. It's enough. We don't have to listen to someone or a bully at school telling you that you're less than. That's not okay, right? Because that's what goes on in real life for adults. And so it was more about just gathering strength to be more into myself, really create a foundational space somehow, because I knew that this wave that was almost like a tsunami around the world was going to be really hard to say no to really and most people didn't have a surfboard or a boat to traverse the waters that came through and washed away what we had in ourselves, outside of ourselves. We lost people passed away, from, and there's so many things that just upset me about the situation. And it's not about the people, it's about how it was presented. And it just fooled people, this manipulation, this deception tactic. And because everyone blindly trusts the exterior parts of themselves versus themselves, that it was hard to really just separate my anger that, no one can see that this is a manipulation. And you and I both know that the body comes with everything it needs, and it's self-healing. It does what it needs to do. But again, we have to be in that higher vibrational space, having the awareness, the wisdom to use the vessel as it is supposed to. But we don't have that, right? We trust in the exterior to tell us what to do and traverse in our mind, in our bodies, right? In our lives. We should do this, we should do that, versus you tapping into yourself and asking your heart, is this for my highest good? Because your heart will know, even if you're new at questioning things and going within yourself, if you ask yourself for one moment, close your eyes and ask your heart a question that you've been wanting an answer to, the answer is there, just waiting for you to ask it. Right? So that's why I felt so inspired to really just share, right? And I didn't want to make it about what Claudia has to say. And that's why I would have 2 to 3 people. So it would be a beautiful conversation and having other people also speak on this. And, again, I am in this reality, I'm a nobody, so I don't have millions of followers. But what I learned is that the people that are ready to hear the message will find our podcast, right? Our message. So it wasn't, also learning where your ego wants to sabotage, right? And wants to keep you safe in survivor space, and like, oh, you're not good enough, or who are you to say XYZ? But it's being the way shower and standing in that space and saying, no, this is, yes, personally, I don't agree with it, but energetically, if energetically I'm feeling that this is a hard no, this is bigger than me. This is bigger than my opinion. And so I had to figure out how to mold it where it's welcoming and not attacking people's ego, right? Because if you start saying, I think that you shouldn't do this, immediately their ego is going to shut down, make a wall, and not hear you. And I didn't want that. I wanted to be welcoming and self-explorative, for you to come into your space and start being curious about what you already know. I think everyone that's here listening is well self-aware to even be listening to this podcast and to have the questions, right? Because you're coming in here wondering, all these beautiful conversations that Carol May has on her podcast, and I'm sure resonates on her Instagram too. She shares so many beautiful high resonance messages. And I think for the person listening, I highly invite you to keep diving deep and intimately get to know yourself, because no one's going to know you like you. No one. And your partner, your children, no one. And that's how it is, because you are the only one that lives in this body and in the mind and in your heart. Like, then no one can come in and take over and be like, oh, I know Carol May really well because I lived in her body for a day. Right? And even then, you don't know her because you haven't lived her entire experience of life, right? So only you will know yourself. And so that really is what inspired to come out. And I got laid off that summer, so I started in the fall with this message. And again, just having all these beautiful tools that we learned in the service industry of how people interact, right? Studying human behavior. And I put it into my resume that I am a behavioral researcher, because that's what we've been doing for working for however many years, studying people's behavioral patterns, so that way we can be in that luxury space and being 3 steps ahead, right? I know you well enough that when you come, you're going to need XYZ, and then you're going to want to go here, and then you're going to do this, right? Mm. The question is, for the people in the service industry, are you asking yourself those questions? I know myself well enough, so am I 3 steps ahead of myself? Not the guest or the customer. Am I where I want to be? Am I my most comfortable? Is this the best bed that I can offer myself? Is this the best apartment that I can give myself? Right? How we want to give the guest the best room, the best bed, the best of everything. Are we giving ourselves the best of everything? Because we deserve it just as much as we want to give it. And even though we're working and getting paid for it, it's a good invitation to flip it into yourself.
That's good. That's good that you said that. If only I'd have known that all the time.
Right, me too.
walking around and like serving expensive cocktails to like people
Seriously.
who didn't care about me. But something that you said as well just then, that how 2020 really gave people had the option to see what was happening, and most didn't. And what came to me is how important the work that you are doing with the children are, so that they know from that early age how to connect with themselves and hear themselves. Because the reason I believe why the majority of adults in this world went along with what they were being presented with is because they're not connected. And somewhere, like you say, when it's innate in all of the children, but then at some point during that education and getting into the world, you get split off from your knowing, and then you get told that authority, the world, these big corporations know you better than you, even though they couldn't point you out in a crowd of people. And yet for some reason, and the messaging of that is so strong that everyone believes it. It's like, I will sit in front of my television and that person who's never met me knows me better than me, and I will do everything they say. And when you know, when you break it down like that, you're like, that just sounds dumb, you know, like on a just fundamental like common sense level, to do that sounds dumb, but yet we've all done it to certain levels of extent, you know, until you start to pull back, because we get told that and we get pulled away from essence. I think the only thing for me that really kept me a sense of my core sense going was the fact that I had this dream, and also I was still being creative, so I still had that connection even in the maddest of times, to know that, you know, and I, because I was doing everything that was the world was saying go this way, and I was going that way, so I was always on the outside, which has served me well, thank God. Because it can be that outlier. I mean, have you had any conversations with the children in terms of what they're feeling? How do they feedback? Do they verbalize what they experience on with your work?
Yes, they definitely do. So what I do at the beginning, it's a 30-minute one-on-one, right? I'd have an 8-week program, and I start from basics, you know, what is mindfulness? And they all know, is it paying attention? Yeah, it's paying attention to anything, specifically yourself, right? So I start with asking them, how are you? How was your week? Right? And because I am clairsentient, right? I can feel already, right? I make sure that I'm providing a safe space, right? Because I use Zoom as well. And so I look at the camera as if the child was in front of me, right? I've learned to use the technology, my technology, through this technology, to really put my energetic resonance through there, so they can feel that I'm really present and here for you. So I always ask, how are you? How was your week? And children are not adults. They're like, it was good, which I can't stand. They'll go in and say, well, I did this happened, do. So whatever is coming up, and the part of their story that may be their densest, right, heaviest negative energy, is what I'll start tackling. And I have a format of my classes every week. We're going to do this. We're going to talk about the breath. We're going to talk about gratitude, yada, yada, yada. But if in that space today, they're not at their best selves, I will tackle that over whatever I had planned, because it's not about me. It's making them understand that I am here and I see you and I'm here for you. What do you need from me, support-wise, for you to come back to your center? How can I make you come back here? And have you have the mind understand, you know, the tricks it starts to play, because I teach from 7 to 12-year-olds. And so they're a little older, where they start to understand the mind, right? Their mind starts to tell them things like, oh, I'm not good enough. I had one child like that she didn't feel good enough. And so it was tackling that aspect. Why don't you feel good enough? Where is this coming from, right? And because they are children, they tell you everything when you offer that safe space. Right? The first day of class, they're always apprehensive, which any child naturally is going to be with a strange person. But once they can see, and that's why I work so hard on making sure that I can be my most authentic, highest energetic self with them, because by the second class, they're like, they're so comfortable and safe that they can tell me everything. And then I can explore further, make them see who they are, right? And giving them tools, because even the meditational tools that I give them are not like the ones we do as adults. It's more about meditational body ones, like movement, standing, walking, running in place. Like, there's so much, because they're in a different space than we are, right? That for them to sit there, not to say that they can't, because they can sit still and meditate. I would say after a few weeks of them understanding themselves and why that is, about making them understand, right? Not even making them, just having the understanding, creating that awareness within them of where is this flow going? You know, there was one student who asked me first day, and I love him because this is what children are. So after 8 weeks, how am I going to be different? And I wasn't, oh, how do I answer this? No, yes, I love it. Let's go. This is how, I'm not saying you're going to be different. These are the tools that we're going to talk about, and it's up to you to decide to use them or not moving forward after me, right? And I don't only offer 8 weeks. I offer continued education. So I have more explorative, because mindfulness is such an infinite topic, and it covers so many other subjects that I can talk about it forever. It is what I love doing. And so I can just be here all day. And so that's what I do, is kind of just give them something that, coming again, it comes from a space of not having, right? That's where I came from. I had to raise myself and just figure out life on my own and not having structure. And so seeing what is needed, that I became so intuitive when I started teaching, that's why I was flabbergasted. The first child I had, I thought, how do I know what I'm doing? What? How is this coming to me so natural? That I had a moment of, we talked about celebrities and such, like I had the imposter syndrome for a moment, like, who am I to do this? Since I didn't go to school. First, there's no school for this. There's school for mindfulness, but not to teach the children. But then I thought, if I was an A-lister who came up with this, they would follow blindly into this space. So why wouldn't I? Just because I'm not someone that the media portrays as knowing better than me, right? So I thought, no, I know better, because I went through it. I've experienced it. I'm not getting paid to say it. I'm not getting paid to sell it. It's coming in genuinely from my heart, from knowing myself deeply and intimately, and knowing that I'm not healed. I'm not going to ever be healed. I'm never going to claim that, because that's a false sense of self, wanting to be, I don't know, a feeling of, and this is what bothers me about these fake woke gurus, where they're selling you happiness and like whole healing, that you're going to be normal, or I don't even know what that even looks like or feels like, right? It's just, I think that for me, the success is knowing yourself in all aspects. No matter if today I may not be at my best, accepting that, giving myself grace, and do what I can and move in that space, right? If I am at my best self, how can I provide? How can I give, right? How am I giving from that space? So that's what I offer the kids so they know, like, when you are not your best, that's okay, because this is what we can do instead, right? And like you said, like at some point where we're detached from ourselves, I want them to understand that this is important, and you're going to use this for the rest of your life. And so it's a definitely magical space to have them verbalize, because they don't hold back. Once you offer the safe space, they don't hold back. They really don't. They'll call out, they'll throw anybody under the bus, their parents, they don't. But I also know not to pry. I never ask private questions, because I am not a therapist. And also I am not, that is not where, I know my boundary. My boundary is for you to get to know yourself. It has nothing to do with outside of that. That's none of my business.
That's so perfect, and it's so necessary. I think it's one of those things that I wish I had, you always kind of think like, why do, when you discover something in your adulthood, you're like, who would I be if I'd have learned this when I was that age? I would be like like off in the clouds. But then the journey that you've taken and the value of it. So, but it's a beautiful thing, and I really hope it kind of spreads for you and just turns up everywhere. Because it's just so totally necessary, and it's such a precarious time for children across the world right now.
Yes.
And that some adults are brave enough to create and provide for them is something to take on board, because we're seeing that there are a lot of parents abandoning their children at the moment. and it's hard to witness. So that there are still people like yourself creating and giving, and knowing that to feed them and to get them to be able to have that connection with themselves, to be able to self-regulate on a spiritual level, at that point is just going to create powerful individuals in this world that we're moving into. And like if we've got some hope that there are youth that are learning tools like this that will counteract where things could go, then we all stand a chance. I think it's going to be something really amazing. So thank you for sharing. And where can people find out about you and your work? What the websites, the social medias? Give it all away.
Sure. Everyone can find me with the Children's Mindfulness School is mindfulkids.com. So mindfulkids.com, I have all the information on there. You can sign up. I actually have class starting March 25th and moving forward. So if you're not available that Saturday, please feel free. And if you're international, I'm happy to work with your time difference. That's because the education is so important. It's not, again, about me. So if you're international outside of the United States and you want your child to participate, please reach out to me at ourmindfulkids.com. Outside of that, you can find me at presently Aqui. And Aqui is AQUI, which means here in Spanish, which means presently here. And so presentlyaqui.com is basically where you can definitely find me on Instagram, my website, Twitter, Facebook, on and on. And that's also the podcast that I host. But my website, Presently Aqui, will lead you to Our Mindful Kids in case, either way, you'll be able to find me on either platform.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So, yeah, great for you to come and great for you to share. I truly appreciate it. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for... Again, I think that these connections, we're far away, but I was thinking about this yesterday quickly, is that, when we're doing the work, we become these lighthouses, right? And if you think about a lighthouse, there's not two together, there's only the one bringing in the ship. So it makes sense that we're not living in the same space because we're holding that energetic resonance where you are, right? In London. I'm in Los Angeles, and I had this beautiful interview with this woman in Australia. So it was that feeling. I'm like, yeah, of course, these lighthouses, these powerhouses are situated in different places in the world. So for the person, the boat that's lost can be found through these beautiful powerhouses that are around the world. And then you can park your boat on shore and create your own lighthouse.
Thank you, Claudia, for sharing on this episode, and thank you for listening. You can find out more about me on my website, carolmaywhittick.com, carolmaywhittick.com. I'm on Facebook, Carol May Whittick, and Instagram, Casmic, CAZMICK. Once again, check the link in the show notes for more information about higher energetic resonance spiritual life coaching. And also remember, I have a sister podcast, Her Inspirations. If you're listening on Apple, it will be under the channel. If you're on any other platform, just search Her Inspirations. Until the next episode, have a great week. Thank you.